You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Friday the 21st of December, or, according to the Mayans, Doomsday. So if you cannot get The World at 8, you'll know why. Parents fury as Christian primary school bans Christmas nativity play. EDL to stage demo against Islamic school plans. Fewer Germans find children worthwhile. Risk of poverty for Italians growing at fastest rate in EU. Nick Griffin, MEP, at home in the valleys. Coptic Christians ask world to cut ties with Morsi's Egypt. Vladimir Putin calls on Russian families to have 3 children. Polio workers killed in Pakistan. Thought for the day, a Merry Christmas for a chosen few. And finally, or maybe not, way back on August the 11th, 3114 BC, our time, etc, etc. UK news. Parents fury as Christian primary school bans Christmas nativity play from the timetable. Parents have renamed a Christian primary school the Scrooge Academy after it banned Christmas from the timetable. Oasis Academy in Nunsthorpe or near Grimsby has decided there will be no nativity play for its pupils because of its poor academic performance. The students aged 4 to 11 are being penalised because the school says the festivities would interrupt pupil learning as it strives to improve achievements in maths and English. EDL to stage demo against Islamic school plans for Biker Grove building. The English Defence League, EDL, is to stage a demo in Newcastle after the City Council approved plans to turn the Biker Grove building into an Islamic school. The protest has been criticised by interfaith and anti-fascist groups, with plans already underway for a counter-demonstration. The rally, the first to be organised in Newcastle by the organisation since 2010, has been approved on a national level and will take place in May next year, according to an EDL regional spokesman. Last week Newcastle City Council gave permission to convert Benwell Towers, formerly used by the BBC to film Biker Grove, into a fee-paying Islamic school. European news. Fewer Germans find children worthwhile. Germany's birth rate has been low for years, but a new study released on Monday revealed the country is becoming a less attractive place to have children due to difficulties balancing family with work. Researchers from the Federal Institute for Population Research found around a quarter of German women born between 1964 and 1968 do not have children primarily because of an apparent incompatibility with having a career. Seen by the Süddeutsche Zeitung, the study found that Germany's long-held cultural idea of a good mother, in which women stay at home to raise their children, was still so present in the country's collective psyche that working women were opting not to have children. There are just 10 countries in Europe which have a lower birth rate than Germany, which currently stands at 1.39 children per woman. Iceland leads the way with 2.20 and Latvia was at the bottom with 1.17. Worldwide, Germany is one of the countries with the highest number of childless women. A World at 8 spokesperson commented, "No doubt this lack of German children is more than made up for by Islamic Turkish mothers." Risk of poverty for Italians growing at fastest rate in EU. The percentage of Italians at risk of falling into poverty has been rising at the quickest pace recorded in the European Union, says a study released Tuesday. According to report Europe 2020, Italy has seen the risk of poverty rate rise to 29.9% in 2011 from 26.3% in 2010. That increase is the greatest recorded amongst EU countries, said the report. Especially hard hit are the families with children, particularly those in the south of Italy, and the elderly are also at risk. I hand you over now to Nick Griffin, MEP, at home in the valleys.
Did I vote? The question is, why didn't Nigel Farage? This was the last week of 2012's parliamentary business in Brussels, with votes at committee level. As my Twitter followers already know, my vote was one of those which by a whisker knocked out several amendments by the watermelon Greens aimed at subjecting bikes to the same new wave of job-destroying, killjoy, nanny state controls as are being aimed at cars. At the same time, though, I was receiving a fair few requests from British fishermen and conservationists to vote for measures which could begin to undo the catastrophic damage done to our fish stocks by the EU's Common Fisheries Policy. Those contacting me were, however, acting under a misapprehension, because not being on the Fisheries Committee, I'm not entitled to vote on it. The man who is supposed to be standing up for British interests and common sense on that important committee is that darling of the pro-EU BBC, Nigel Farage. As it's his committee, I have no doubt that he would have received a lot more requests to vote the right way than I did, so it's particularly shocking to learn that, as is very often the case, Farage simply didn't bother to attend at all. Please note that I'm not saying that he should attend every committee meeting or even every vote. I don't, because many of them are a complete waste of time. But when constituents and concerned members of the great British public take the time to make contact over an issue where British interests are directly at stake, and where a single vote on a relatively small committee can prevent some extra piece of leftist insanity from seeing the light of day, I believe it's a different matter. And I believe that it's utterly wrong for Farage to pocket his salary and grub for votes from people who genuinely but wrongly believe that he and his phony safety valve party are standing up for Britain in Brussels. In my BNP TV Christmas message, I give an overview of how 2012 has been a very good year for the British National Party. From the continued turnaround to good health of our finances, through to our best ever parliamentary by-election result in Rotherham, where, in case you've been living in a cave for some weeks, we won more votes than the Conservatives and Lib Dems combined. It's all in my end of year roundup. So I want to use this, my last World at 8 broadcast of 2012, to look more closely at UKIP. After all, the left often refer to them as the BNP in blazers. So, given that they're now poised to overtake the collapsing Lib Dems in the opinion polls, it would be strange of us to pretend they're not of interest. The starting point, of course, has to be the fact that, at election times especially, UKIP pretend to have our policies, simply because they know they're very popular. Farage is also on record as saying that, out of everything he's achieved in what, to be fair to acknowledge, is a remarkable political career, the thing that gives him most pride is that UKIP blocks the BNP. The skin-deep similarities are therefore both deliberate and a backhanded compliment to us, because if we hadn't worked so hard to give the British people back a real democratic choice, Farage and his BBC allies would not need to go to such extraordinary lengths to block us. But behind their empty rhetoric and stunts like the Labour UKIP adoption row trick in Rotherham, a closer look reveals that, in reality, the BNP and UKIP are poles apart on many crucial issues. These include immigration, for UKIP's position is explicitly civic nationalist, just another part of the establishment's collective attack on the very right of the British people to survive in our own homeland. It's not just a matter of their constitution declaring that UKIP is anti-racist. Their immigration policy is for the phased replacement of the ethnic British. Because that's the reality of their call for balanced migration. It may sound a reasonable term, but what Farage and co actually mean by it is that for every indigenous Brit who leaves occupied London or Birmingham and flees to Spain or Australia, UKIP are delighted to let in another Somalian. To them, it's only a question of numbers. Indeed, a major reason for UKIP's criticism of large-scale immigration from Eastern Europe is that it has made it harder for traditional immigrants from Asia and Africa to come to Britain. All in all, UKIP's immigration policy is a nastier hoax even than the empty pre-election promises of action we've heard for decades from the Tories, and that are now being offered even by Labour. The consolation we should take from this is that when everybody who's anybody on the political stage feels compelled to try to steal our clothes, we've clearly won the argument itself, hands down. If they were, by some miracle, to deliver on their implied promises, we'd get our way in any case. Or, when they do not, the public will know who to turn to get what they want. On top of immigration in general, we all know of the specific added danger from Islamic immigration. UKIP dabbled with this issue too under their previous leader, but Farage knows that his marriage of convenience with the BBC is conditional on steering clear of this subject. So while UKIP sometimes plays the anti-mosque card at local council level, Nigel speaks for the party as a whole when he declares that they have, quote, no problem with Islam, unquote. Even in Rotherham, UKIP's local group was shocked to be ordered by their head office not to mention Islam or grooming during the election campaign. Part of the reason UKIP is so relaxed about Islam is that it has no interest in or sympathy for traditional Christian values. This was highlighted just this week when Farage and the rest of the leadership initially backed Geoffrey Clark, a UKIP council election candidate in Kent, despite his proposing the compulsory murder of handicapped babies to prevent them from being, quote, a burden on the state, unquote. The same ruthless materialism plays a part in UKIP's fanatical support for deregulated banking, free trade and privatisation. Far from being traditionalist or nationalist, it is a party for the super rich. UKIP's ideology is Thatcherite neocon liberalism on acid. It's the polar opposite of our nationalism, under which banking, particularly the power to create credit, would be under the control of the sovereign nation state. As for UKIP's free trade mania, this is not only a path to economic suicide. The various free trade agreements which UKIP so favours are also as direct an assault on our national sovereignty as is membership of the European Union. This was highlighted once more earlier this month in the last parliamentary session in Strasbourg, where UKIP's MEPs voted against measures which could have allowed limited protection for what is left of the British steel industry. Give them a chance to support greedy banks or the right of multinational corporations to snap up Britain's Commonwealth assets at fire sale prices, on the other hand, and UKIP are at the head of the queue. UKIP's specifically anti-nationalist position goes beyond mere money as well. The only subsection Farage permits is UKIP Friends of Israel. He and the rest of the leadership are committed supporters of neocon wars in the Middle East and of meddling in Syria and Iran. Here too we see the reality of an internationalist party completely the opposite of our nationalist position, which is to keep Britain out of other people's quarrels. As part of the same internationalist neocon package, UKIP are viciously anti-Russian. This, incidentally, is why they nowadays get plugged a great deal on Russia Today, because RT has fallen into the hands of the anti-Putin faction headed by Medvedev and allied to exiled oligarchs. This is also why UKIP are so pro-fracking that they're prepared to risk losing large numbers of rural votes in order to support the neocon dash for shale gas. Even worse, they're not only in favour of it, but are delighted with the idea of it being under foreign control. The nationalist position, of course, is either to ban it completely or to have it under state control, with a significant part of the potentially huge profits going to the local community. To sum up, UKIP is in fact nothing more than a Tory splinter group, an internationalist, big business and bankers party. They have an immigration policy that would facilitate the stealth replacement of the British in our own homeland, and they are ready to ruin Britain for short-term profit and to help the USA continue to dominate the world. No wonder their logo is a pound sign, because UKIP is all about the money. So why are they being promoted so ruthlessly? There are three main reasons. 1. To block the British National Party. This has been going on for years, from relatives of Labour councillors standing for UKIP in BNP target wards, through to media promotion at every level. 2. To split the Conservative vote and destroy the Tory party. This now appears to be the key motivation of Labour and the BBC in their plugging of Farage. And 3. To put pressure on Cameron to keep his broken promise to give us a referendum on Europe. This being the agenda of the right-wing press, particularly the Telegraph, Mail and Express. With so much effort being put in by so many people into this operation, it's inevitable that we will have to endure more of the artificial promotion of Farage and his bogus party. But don't get disheartened. In the long term, a lot of good will come from this. It's helping to destroy the Tory party and to break old voter loyalties. Once they've changed how they vote once, it's much easier to do it again. By posing as like us, UKIP is further validating our arguments and raising public expectations on which, in the end, only we will ever deliver. Perhaps most important, if UKIP manages to move beyond being a virtual party that functions thanks to laundered CIA money and artificial media hype, the people it would recruit and politicise would be easy pickings for a systematic campaign by us of entryism, education and radicalisation. If UKIP do go on to break the old mould of British politics, it will not be the end of the story, but only another chapter in it. And rest assured, provided we get on with the job of educating and organising for the long run, the chapter after the UKIP one will be ours. I look forward to talking to you again on January the 8th. Until then, avoid Danish bacon, because Denmark has refused to implement the ban on sow stalls. Politely refuse mince pies containing polonium, and steer clear of lager because it's a fizzy capitalist con trick that really isn't worth the calories. I'm off to have a brandy and Benedictine, a splendid mix I discovered on account of it having been a favoured drink in Burnley since the survivors of the local regiment came home in 1918 with a bottle of Benedictine each in their kit bags. Half of all the Benedictine sold in Britain still goes to East Lancashire. Not a lot of people know that, but whatever your tipple, here's wishing you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Thank you, Nick. Benedictine is really lovely and you deserve it. We all at World at 8 and Radio Britain wish you and your family a wonderful Christmas and a very happy New Year. World News. Coptic Christians ask world to cut ties with Morsi's Egypt. The founder of an international group of advocates for the equality and rights of Coptic Christians is appealing to the leaders of democratic nations to cut any ties with Egypt. The voice of the Copts is attempting to thwart President Mohamed Morsi's regime from implementing a primarily Islamic-based constitution. Vladimir Putin calls on Russian families to have 3 children. President Vladimir Putin has urged Russians to have at least 3 children, as he said a resurgent nation should be a confident and influential power on the world stage. In a bullish State of the Nation address in Moscow on Wednesday, Mr Putin promised to smite corruption, create millions of new jobs and boost Russia's military might, while warning that foreign meddling in the country's internal affairs was unacceptable. He claimed the country shared universal democratic values, adding, "Russian democracy is the power of the Russian people with their own traditions of national self-government and not the realisation of standards foisted on us from outside." This presenter says Putin is right. Only through children can a nation survive and prosper, and preferably should be those of the indigenous peoples. I like Putin. He is the only Russian I really admire, apart of course from Sergei the Meerkat, and he is my man. Polio workers killed in Pakistan. 6 health workers who were part of a polio immunisation drive have been shot dead inside 24 hours in Pakistan. Gunmen shot 4 dead of the health workers as they were administering the oral polio vaccine in Karachi, Pakistan's largest city and the capital of Sindh province, a police spokesman told the DPA news agency. 2 male workers also sustained injuries in the attack. Another female vaccinator was killed in the northwestern city of Peshawar. The murders in Karachi and Peshawar have prompted authorities to suspend the polio campaign there. The health minister has ordered the suspension of the anti-polio campaign throughout Sindh following the killings, senior government official Salim Khan said. A decision to restore the immunisation drive will be taken after assessing the security situation, he added. Thought for the day. Merry Christmas for a chosen few. I'm going to finish this year on a positive note, but not yet. I'm giving vent on 3 items this last pre-Christmas news. 1. How we ourselves are cancelling Christmas. 2. Food banks. And 3. A missing child apparently not missing. Now, on visiting Tesco's this morning, I was pleased to see a display of paintings from young children from the C of E, that is, to the uninitiated, Church of England, Binsford Primary School on display. I did expect, however, to see the Nativity, the 3 kings, or maybe a camel or a palm tree to denote the Holy Land, but no, and bear in mind this is from a small local church school. All the paintings, without exception, were of snowmen and a couple of Santa Claus, or St Nicholas. It was seen that Binsford Primary is rife with common purpose or an overflow of non-Christian ethnics, or why didn't they use this season to impress on their charges the importance of our only Christian celebration apart from Easter? I have never been a Bible thumper, but there again I was brought up with Christmas as a time for baby Jesus and Santa Claus, not a handful of stars or a sodding snowman. Children from other religions in this country keep and observe their own festivals undeterred, so why should our children not be encouraged to keep theirs? It seems only fair. In France they're going through the same ridiculous backtracking we are, but at least they have not resorted to the disgusting Belgian cube tree yet. A kindergarten in France has cancelled its annual visit from Santa Claus. School administrators say tight finances are to blame, but parents don't believe them. They're certain that the exclusion of Santa is an attempt to placate the Muslims, and they're up in arms about that decision. The following text is thanks to Hermes and our European reporter for translation. Kindergarten children in Loire deprived of visit by Father Christmas. This is a story that keeps the mood boiling at kindergarten in Montargis-Loire. With the holiday season approaching, the headmistress decided to cancel the ritual visit of Father Christmas to the classrooms. Official reason: financial problems. Stunned parents charged that it was instead on religious grounds, and the headmistress gave in. For some parents with children in the Grand Clos kindergarten, there is no doubt that the reason for the cancellation of the visit of the white-bearded man in a red suit is of a religious kind. A mother declared on Wednesday in Le Parisien, "Today in France, that the director told me she did not want her wrist to be slapped by some Muslim families." The problem was confirmed by the deputy mayor of Montargis, who is responsible for matters concerning children. He adds that each year families threaten to boycott the school in the day of Santa's visit. The director gave in. For some this is too much. It is, according to them, the Islamisation of a school. Now put that with the puerile crap being passed on to our children, and it doesn't take brain of Britain to see which way Europe is going. A steady progressive encroachment of Western values and religions, ably helped by the progressives in power. Which, although with an almost cowardly obeisance from our churches to another religion, namely Islam, and one can see why Sharia is not too far away in the future. I say I will be celebrating all the religions if necessary this Christmas. Like Eid and Ramadan in reverse, I will be stuffing my face at all hours of day and night and drinking like a fish because I am a Western Christian. I will be hanging lights like during Diwali, although I draw the line at pouring red paint everywhere. So there, progressives. One can encompass a proper Christmas without offending anyone. Mind you, you might have to put a turban on Santa. Now number 2, food banks. In my innocence I always thought that food banks, which are not a new idea, were there to help our homeless and needy. Now call me odd, but a homeless man or woman, or a hungry child, or a starving pensioner, whatever their ethnicity, should be looked after, even if they do not appreciate Christmas in its true sense. But I was appalled at the figures given out on a Southern News item a few days ago, and indeed who they chose to represent those in need. I was expecting a homeless guy or a lonely pensioner, preferably white of course, but what I got was the face of TV today, an immigrant. A young man, of course, called Jose Jesus, who was an indeterminate shade of cocoa, non-African, but what I couldn't say. He spoke little or no English, but apparently had secured enough phrases to obtain a wife over here who was now expecting their first child. Jose has no job and will be having his Christmas dinner with his wife at the local housing association giveaway. Now poor Jose will not get a job because he is not Asian, Nepalese or Chinese or Thai, so that rules out all the takeaways, restaurants and kebab stalls who only ever employ their own. His English is appalling, so even a greedy Brit could not really get away with employing him. So what is his future, and even more importantly, the future of the children they no doubt will produce willy-nilly? I'm not blaming him, but Jose and thousands like him are still coming into this country with no visible means of support, and to cap it all, they are breeding, which means once again our needy children, pensioners and homeless will have their freebies cut short when it all runs out. Because it will run out, and one can only hope that when the pot is empty, all these people who have come into this country in the hope of not getting jobs but cashing in on the benefits we give anyone who produces children, go home or go somewhere else. I'm of the opinion that the British people should have been given some sort of choice over how many immigrants should have been taken many years ago, then our food banks, soup kitchens and all the wonderful people who run and contribute to them would have the satisfaction of knowing they are helping genuine cases and not people who have just jumped on the bandwagon over here. The figures speak for themselves. The needy are 4 times higher than last Christmas. Already 110,000 needy have been helped, and by Christmas the figure will read 250,000. One worker from Kent was a progressive. She blames, wait for it, debt, the credit crunch and the fact that the figures have been hidden up to now. In fact, anything other than the massive immigration of the poor from one country to another. Nationally, in fact, the figures expected in the near future are a massive 13 million people that could be classed as needy and needing free food. This effectively must read that it's not only British Indigenous people but mainly newcomers to this island. Don't get me wrong, I have nothing but admiration for our people, and it is mostly white people doing all the work actually getting the food to the needy. One guy said they'll only stop on Christmas Day, and that will be when they've delivered all the food to the places to cook. If I won the lottery, I would open a huge centre for homeless and needy people, but they would be our homeless and needy people, homeless ex-soldiers and hard-up families. I would not cater to immigrants who had just come into the country at all, but I would help earlier immigrants if needed from 20 odd years ago. But then they often do not end up homeless or needy, and you rarely see them helping out in food banks, so I rest my case. Now, number 3 is very odd. I had an email from a friend which showed a lovely little girl of 11 who has apparently gone missing in Plumstead, which is in a heavily enriched area of London and has its own Islamic centre. Apparently a 13-year-old girl went missing in September, so do not know if she was found or not. The police in all their bravery have issued a picture of a ginger-haired white bloke in connection with an entirely different sort of case, and I quote, "Police have released an image of a man alleged to have questioned and sworn at children outside Thomas Tallis School. Officers are appealing for information after a number of incidents where pupils have received unwelcome advances. The e-fit has been created after children described a man with red hair between 30 and 40 years old and wearing a green parka jacket. Rumours of attempted abductions outside the Kidbrooke-based school have been dismissed by police. Detective Inspector Jonathan Mayans said, 'If you know the man in the picture, please contact us, we'd like to speak to him. I would like to stress that so far the allegations made amount to an incident of antisocial behaviour.' So we have the same misinformation that we have had from the north of our country for the last 30 years. Obviously this guy would appear to be a complete nutter. And unless there is a tribe of ginger-haired Muslims on the rampage, I do not think even the police will be using him for anything other than a red herring. I have just received the Facebook message from my source, posted by the mother. I quote, 'Has anyone seen this girl? Hasn't been home from school and was due home at 7 tonight, but hasn't returned. Police are out look for her. Her name's Taylor, 11 years old from Plumstead, and was last seen at Crownwood School. Was last seen wearing pleated grey skirt, pink blouse, black and purple leopard print coat, black leggings, black shoes and black coat. Her hair's down. Anyone seen her, please inbox. Please keep this post bumped.' This was posted last night. The police have been informed but the papers haven't, and I cannot find any reference to Taylor in the papers. But we know they will avoid any connection to Islam if there is any, and either silence it or arrest a white challenged person. Our children do not rate the high profile of Stephen Lawrence, which was still brought up in memorable highlights of 2012, which I turned off immediately, as it contained all my favourites. Lawrence, Olympics and Paralympics. Oh, roll on the Mayans, matey. And finally, talking about the Mayans, the Mayan apocalypse as it didn't happen. This article was written by Dr. Brooke Magnanti, formerly known as La Belle de Jour, in the Telegraph and caught my eye. I read, 13 Lombaktons ago, way back on August the 11th, 3114 BC, our time the world began. We've had a pretty good innings, ladies and gentlemen, cured all sorts of disease, created great art, invented the printing press, jazz and X Factor, and generally had a good laugh. But time is up. The Mayans predicted it and most modern scientists apparently agree. Today, Friday, December the 21st, at the stroke of solstice, 11:11 AM GST, the Mayan calendar will click over to read 13 Baktung, for the first time in 5,125 years. For any ancient Mayans who may still be hanging around, it's kind of like hitting 3 zeros on your odometer. For some others, however, it could be the end of the world. I happen to think the Mayan calendar coming to an end has no more or less significance than one of our own coming to an end. Reach the end of December, collect fluffy kitten boy band Peter Andre's Abs themed calendar from your local card shop and or granny, open cover and turn to January. Life carries on as normal, give or take a banging hangover. But for some others it's a cause for panic buying and buying a retreat in the woods. I guess I can be blasé about all this since I already live in the woods and panic buy as a default setting. So if you're already up to your ears in toilet rolls and tins of Fray Bentos, how best to spend the last hours on earth? I like this woman, and although I cannot stand Edwina Currie, her idea of spending her last day with George Clooney is rather a good one, although my better half would not allow it. Now, if given the chance for my last 24 hours, I would like to spend the day with Jeff Goldblum and a crate of very good champagne. Now the 3 things against this in the real world are: what man in his right mind, even if he is middle-aged, would spend his last 24 hours with a woman of my age? Jeff, bless him, is Jewish and probably doesn't drink, and I know his politics and mine are anything but compatible, so he would spend the whole time arguing with me getting progressively drunker. Not a good scene. So I'll stick to my better half and 3 cats, all of whom adore me as I am, warts and all. So with this in mind, glad we've made it, and let's see how the human race can cock up the next few millennia. Now for our listeners in the UK and worldwide, a very happy Christmas and a prosperous New Year. We'll be off from air tonight until Monday, January 7th, when the World at 8 resumes again in all its glory. There'll be a pre-Christmas service from our Reverend Robert West this Sunday. You have been listening to the World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart, and I and the team at World at 8 and Radio Britain wish you all a very happy and a very safe Christmas holiday.